Screen calibration. Admittedly, it isn't sexy, but if you edit photographs, then you definitely need to get this right. So in this video, we'll go through the how, why, and what, so you can be 100% sure that what you see is what you get. Okay, so I am going to be going through this using a BenQ display and the new BenQ software called Palette Master Ultimate, which is completely free for BenQ users, but all the settings I go through will be relevant for you no matter what display or calibration device and software you're using. I also spoke with Dr Chris Bai from BenQ and asked him some questions about calibration so that you don't just get to know how to do this correctly, but understand what you're doing and why. Right, let's dive in. Now I will be doing some other videos on Palette Master Ultimate because it does way more than what I'm going to cover in this video. But when I first open up the new Palette Master Ultimate, I need to tell it which display I'm calibrating. Then we choose the calibration device we're using, which I have already connected before I started the software. So I choose it from the ones listed and then give it a moment to be recognized, and once it is, we then see that it is shown as connected. We then have three activity choices to choose from. Color calibration, which is what we'll be doing, and then there's advanced color adjust, which is big news if you are a BenQ user, so I'm going to cover that in another video. And then there's validation. So I'll choose color calibration and click on start. On this next screen, we have this calibration target menu, and by default, it's set to photographer, and these are the default settings for brightness, color space, white point, black point, and so on. And these are what the display will be calibrated to. There's other choices in here too, depending on what you're going to be doing, so you just choose the most suitable one. Now I'm sticking with photographer, but I do want to change some of the settings because as they are, they don't give the best results for my room and the lighting. So I'll click on edit target. And now I can dial in what I know is best for me. First of all, we have luminance, and this is without doubt the most important setting because this, when it's set wrong, is definitely what's going to give you, if you do lots of printing, prints that come out way too dark. You'll often hear it recommended to set luminance between 80 and 120 candela, but this never worked for me. Prints were always too dark. So after lots of testing and lots of money wasted on ink and paper, I discovered that for my room, a luminance of 60 candela gives the best results. So I open the menu, go to custom and just type in 60. Next we have the white point. In other words, what color temperature do you want your display set to? The default is D65, which is basically 6500 Kelvin. And this is the value that most mobile phones, tablets and smart televisions are set to these days. D65 is considered industry standard for daylight. And this came about a few years ago in London when a group of people took measurements at midday in Greenwich for 5 consecutive days. And the average temperature reading that they got was something like 6506. So it was decided that daylight temperature would be 6500 Kelvin, which is D65. Now that's great for general day-to-day, editing images, sharing them online, sending to others and so on. But if you like to print your images, then to get a better screen to print match, which is definitely the goal, a value of around 5000 Kelvin works best. So I'm going to choose D50. Next we have gamut, or the color space you want to calibrate your display to. And for this, I'm going to go with Adobe RGB. Next we have gamma, and this relates to the display's pixels luminance value at every brightness level from 0 to 100%. A lower gamma makes shadows look brighter and can result in a flatter, washed out image, where it's harder to see brighter highlights. Higher gamma can make it harder to see detail in shadows. The recommended value to use is 2.2. But if you are calibrating to get a better screen to print match, then use L*. And at the end of the video, one of the questions answered by Dr Chris Bai is why you would go for L* and what exactly is it. But for general day-to-day use, the best option to go for is 2.2. Now in 𝐵 𝗏 we have this checkbox for enhanced gamma calibration, which if we go for it does make the calibration process take a little bit longer. Now this is really only relevant if you work on a lot of black and white images. So if that's not the case, don't bother ticking the checkbox. Now I do quite a bit of black and white images, so I will tick the checkbox. Finally, we have the black point, and if you're looking for your display to look its best for day-to-day browsing, editing, watching movies, gaming and so on, then go with absolute 0, which will ensure great contrast with deep blacks. However, if you do a lot of printing, then you're not going to want that, because the blacks you see on the display will be too black. They'll contain no detail and colour can be affected in those dark areas. This is why it's recommended to go for a black point value of 0.5. Once you have your settings dialed in, as can be done here in 𝐵 𝗏, most software will allow you to save those settings so that you can use them again later without having to manually dial in settings each and every time. Then on the next screen we see a confirmation of the settings we've dialed in. So we have luminance of 60 candela, a white point of D50 for a better screen to print match. For everything else, I would use D65. The gamut or colour space is Adobe RGB. A gamma of L*, again for a better screen to print match, otherwise it would be 2.2. And black point is set to 0.5 candela, because again this is for printing, otherwise it would be absolute 0 for the best contrast and the deepest blacks. This bit at the bottom here is where you can choose which of the 3 available slots you want them to be stored in, so calibration 1, 2 or 3, and those correspond to the 1, 2 and 3 on the hotkey puck. So click on next, and this I really like because it gives you a few things to check before going ahead with the calibration. Firstly, making sure your display has been on for at least 30 minutes before doing a calibration to give time for the workings of the display to warm up and settle down. Secondly, use a DisplayPort cable or USB-C cable to connect your display to your computer. Now you can use HDMI if you're able to and you know how to dive into the graphics card settings to make sure that they are set to full range and not limited range. But if you don't know how to, you're not able to, or maybe even you're a Mac user where you can't change that, then DisplayPort cable or USB-C cable is the best option to go for to get the full range of colours from 0 to 255. However, there is also a way we can check to see if we're getting full range, and I'll show you that in a minute. Also, turn off the screensaver and any energy saving settings. And if you're using 2 displays, don't be using mirroring mode. Then we have the ICC version, and this relates to the Colour Management module. That's not hardware, it's software, and refers to such things as Photoshop, Lightroom, Capture One and so on. If you're using fairly recent software that's maybe 5 years old-ish or something like that, then go for the latest version, version 4. But if you're using old software, go for version 2. This profile name here gives a summary of the settings we've applied, but that's it, we're pretty much good to go. So I'll click on next. We're then told to remove the cover on the calibration device. Once that's done, click next and then position the calibration device on the display surface, making sure to angle it back so that the device sits on it with a good seal rather than just hanging there. And then click start. This now is when you see the display going brighter and darker and flashing all different colours up as the calibration device takes readings of the values to then create an ICC profile that sets your display to the correct values of brightness and colour. Now the thing I love about 𝐵 𝗏 is that without manually having to do it, the software also does a validation as part of the process, and this is something that so many people don't do but is massively important because it tells us how good the calibration was and how our display is performing. So now it's finished, let's take a look. So we can see here I wanted a luminance of 60 and we got that. I went for the D50 white point and we got a value of 5017. So yeah, that's pretty damn close. The black point I went for 0.5 candela, and the calibration was able to achieve 0.6. So again, very close, very happy with that. This here though is the best bit. The delta E result. This tells us how well our display is performing and also the quality of the calibration. Anything below 5 is considered very good, and anything below 2 is considered excellent. And you can see here the average achieved in the calibration is 0.6. That is amazing. And the maximum was 1.26. So yeah, very happy with that. Now, it's a good idea to actually save these validation reports because it allows you then to look back over time to see if they're changing at all, which will give you an indication of how your display is performing. You can do that here by simply clicking on Save Report. You can give it a name, and then it's saved as a PDF. All right, so that is my display perfectly calibrated, and all of the settings you see me use there for the luminance, color space, gamma, gamut, black point, and ICC profile version are completely compatible with other software if you're not using BenQ. And like I said, I have 2 calibrations, one for everyday use and one specifically for a better screen to print match that I can dive between using the hotkey puck. Okay, so at the start of this video, I mentioned that I'd had a chat with Dr. Chris Bai from BenQ, asking him specific things about calibration. And I want to share some of that with you now because we've gone through how to calibrate the device, but this now is going to give you some knowledge and understanding as to why we use the settings that we do. All right, okay, so we've got first one. When calibrating your screen with 𝐶 Ultimate, Element, or any calibration software,
yes,
what white point setting would you recommend for a better screen to print match?
Okay, so basically, this is really depend on scenarios. So the scenario you're actually talking about is the screen to print match. So this case, the best white point you want to choose is really depends on the illuminant you're looking at your print. So what this means is actually where your paper, your print is put under. Like, is this a D50 illuminant, or is this like a halogen illuminant, or is this like D65 illuminant? So this really like depends on what kind of what color of light you're looking at. Is it like yellowish light, or is it like bluish light, or is it like a neutral light? Okay, so I think people are really getting confused about this. So that's why the graphics industry, they have a standard they call it D50. It's like they like 5000K, or the graphics art, like they use that as a standard. So this is a standard which actually is a mixture of the daylight, like a 6500K, and the indoor light, the yellowish light, whatever you see in the household. So this is a mixture of this indoor light and outdoor light together. So it's averaged out as a 5000K. Okay.
Right.
So if you don't know what kind of illumination you're looking at, I would say you can go for like this D50 setting. That was the best bet. But if you're really picky about your print and the match, then the best way is to measure the illuminant. Actually, the illumination, actually, I would say the color temperature reflected from your paper. Okay, the reason why is because your paper is not, maybe it's not pure white. Maybe sometimes it's tinted a little bit yellowish or a little bit bluish. So the best way is try to measure from the paper under the illumination and measure that reflecting light. So you can get the paper white as the calibration white for the monitor.
Sure. But for somebody who doesn't have the ability to do that, for a general
then go for D50.
Safe bet, D50. Perfect.
Yeah,
brilliant.
D50, yes.
Okay. Next question. When we last spoke, you mentioned about using L* for the gamma.
Right.
Could you explain why that is? And if people don't have L* setting, would you still suggest maybe using 2.2?
Right. Well, the reason why I mentioned L* is still under a scenario of matching to prints from screen. Okay. And Gamma 2.2 is good for if you don't do it's good for general use. For example, if you're looking at the screen alone, right? Gamma 2.2 is a perfect choice of doing that. Okay, but if we're really picky about this matching screen to the print, 𝐿 gives you the best visual ability of matching the screen to print. The reason why is because the 𝐿 is based on the visual response from the human visual system. Because 𝐿 actually gives out the when we look at this grayscale, 𝐿 gives you like equal steps in the grayscale visually. It's not measurement. It's visually gives you the grayscale, gives you like individual equal steps of differences. So that gives us the best grayscale reproduction from 𝐿. So that's why I recommend it if you want to have a good response, like a good match from screen to print, then 𝐿 curve will be the best. But if you don't have that in your calibration software, then Gamma 2.2 is still a good way to go.
Now, the last thing I want to mention is about the HDMI and how you can check whether to see if you have full range or limited range without diving into the graphics card. Basically, once you've done a calibration, as you can see here, I've done on this new SW272U from BenQ, when we check the validation report, if the average delta E is less than 1, we have full range. Okay, so that's all I had for this video. So if you've got something from it, I'd really appreciate a thumbs up. And if you haven't yet, click on subscribe, because as you know, that's just a great free way that you can support this channel. But for now, that's me, I'm done. I'll catch you in the next video.